The next section we want to take a look at dealing with money and banking is the Federal Reserve Board. The Federal Reserve Board is an independent agency that is not under the jurisdiction of any executive, judicial, or legislative branch of government. They are completely an independent organization. They are also, another name for the Federal Reserve Board is called the Fed, and you may have, over the past couple of weeks, have heard people talk about the Fed, whose current president is Ben Bernanke. The Fed is listed as what we call the lender of last resort. If a bank becomes in dire straits, in other words, the bank does not have enough assets to meet its liabilities and cannot sell anything else that it has, the Fed has the ability to come in and bail out that bank. And we saw that a lot of times in the past since 9/11 and in other instances. There are three functions of the Fed. The first function is that it is a central bank. It is a bank that coordinates the activities of all other banks. It sets policies, it sets the reserve requirements, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And all the other banks, commercial banks, anyone that belongs to the Fed right now, all commercial banks must belong to the Fed. And a lot of other organizations do because it gives people the security that it's insured. The second thing is that it is a banker's bank. When you deposit your money into your checking account, that is your bank. What used to be called Wilmington Trust, M&T, First National Bank of Pennsylvania, PNC, what have you, TD. That's where you keep your money. But the banks send their money to the Fed. So this is the banker's bank. This is where the bankers keep their money. And finally, we call this a quasi-public bank. Earlier I said that the Fed is not under the jurisdiction of any branch of government. It does report to Congress, but Congress cannot dictate that it lower interest rates to get people to buy. It cannot order the Fed that it has to raise interest rates or put more money into circulation or what have you. Remember, money in circulation is called M1. And the reason of that is because it is a quasi-public bank. The Fed has to be accountable to somebody. And in this situation, the way the Fed works is the Fed is a corporation. And as a corporation, the Fed has the right to sell stock in order to raise money, just like DuPont, Exxon, AstraZeneca, what have you. But the only group of people that can buy the Federal Reserve Board stock is the member banks, M&T Bank, National Bank of Pennsylvania National Bank, what have you. They're the only ones that can purchase stock, common stock. And if you can remember, common stock represents ownership. So therefore, the banks themselves own the Fed. However, the individual banks, M&T, First National Bank of Pennsylvania, they are also corporations. They sell their stock to the public, to people like you and I. And therefore, we own M&T stock. We own the common stock of M&T Bank, or First National Bank of Pennsylvania. That means that we own the assets of that bank's stock. Of that bank. We own the asset. The stock represents ownership, and therefore that means that we own everything that the bank owns. One of those things is the Federal Reserve Board stock. So in essence, the Fed, the United States people own the Fed, and the Fed has to work in our best interest. Not in the best interest of any political party, not in the best interest of any executive branch of government. It must of any branch of government, I should say. It must work in our best interest. There are 12 federal banks throughout the United States, each with its own president, what have you. There is a picture in your book about that. One of the most important, if not the most important group, is called the Federal Open Market Committee. And this is also known as FOMC. And their primary purpose is to make decisions on whether they should buy or whether they should sell what we call U.S. securities. A U.S. security would be like a treasury note or a treasury bill, a T-bill. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, and we'll see how that comes into play. There are several functions that the Fed performs. It issues currency. It provides a check clearing system. It sets the reserve requirements. And these are all listed on your book on page 645, provided you have the book Economics. If not, you'll have to find this in your own book that you have. But the primary goal of the Fed, the goal that it was initially founded for, was to control the money supply. Basically, allowing us to be sure that there is always enough money out there to purchase all the goods that have been made. That is their primary goal, is to continually monitor the money supply to make sure that if inflation is running rampant, that it has the ability to raise interest rates to slow down the growth, to curtail spending. Or in our situation right now, we've seen situations that the Fed has never enacted before, where it has actually lowered interest rates almost to zero in order to help spur the economy. So these are the functions of the Fed. But again, the primary function is to control M1. Our banking system exists on what we call a fractional reserve system. There's a nice little tale in there about how the goldsmiths came to be, and you can read that in your book, and it really is very interesting. But for time's sake here, basically what this means, it's the concept of taking your money, taking your paychecks, putting it into your bank, into your checking account. And because of that, what they're going to do is they're going to hold a portion of that for you. Let's say they're going to hold 10 cents of every dollar you put in. So if you put $100 in, they're going to hold $10 of that for you. And with the balance of that $90, they're going to take that and they're going to lend that out to those people who need it, to other businesses and to other consumers. Businesses to buy plant and equipment, or what we call capital, and to other people to buy things like cars, refrigerators, TVs, and what have you. That is the fractional reserve system, the idea of taking your deposits, keeping some on reserve for you, and lending the rest out. The last thing we want to take a look at in this segment is what we call a single commercial bank. And in order for us to begin our analysis, which will happen in a little bit, we need to take a look at a single bank's balance sheet. Now, I know some of you have already taken accounting, or you will take accounting shortly. And a balance sheet tells us the assets, which are things that you own, and they must equal your liabilities, things that you owe, like a mortgage, plus your net worth. And let's assume for a moment that the only possession you have is a car, and the car is worth $25,000, so that would be on the asset column. On the liability column, you have a $20,000 car loan, and when you bought the car, you put $5 down. So therefore, the value of the car, the asset is $25,000, the liability, what you own, is $20,000, and you have $5,000 in net worth. What we want to do is take a look at the bank's balance sheet. Under the asset side is the cash. Now we're going to change this name cash to a little bit later to reserves, but we'll save that for later. The cash that it has on hand. The loans that it gives to particular people, such as businesses and other consumers, and the property that it has. These are the things that it owns. On the liability side, we have that the bank takes demand deposits, your checking account. That is a liability to the bank. When you stub your checkbook, you put in there plus $500 for this week's work. That is an asset to you, to the public, to the person who put the money in the bank, because the bank owes you that on demand. That's why we call them demand deposits. It is a liability to the bank because the bank pays you that. The bank owes you that money on demand. And then the final thing here is what we call net worth. So if you have any questions, post them on discussion board, email me personally. I ask that everybody look at discussion board on a regular basis. Help your other classmates Get concepts as long as you understand them. I will email you personally. I will put the answer on there. The best thing we can do is keep the lines of communication open. Thank you very much.